Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 3 live stream for the RBC Heritage. Also going to talk some Corrales Punta Cana props. We're going to get you guys ready for all of your betting exposure for tomorrow. We're going to look at some of the averages out there from each event. We'll go through the weather report out there as well and some value across the different boards. I'll include Underdog and Prize Picks. Also some matchup bets over there on the sports books. And any sort of bets that you want me to deep dive, feel free to go ahead and throw those in the live chat. And if you're watching this on the replay, you can go ahead and throw them in the comments as well. But hopefully you're having a fantastic Friday out there, ready to talk some golf over here for the weekend. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and let's go ahead and hop on in here. I see we already got Jay down there, also Rashad down there too. He said thanks for the 2 legs, and yeah, ended up being a pretty good day over there, Rashad. Let's run it back over here for moving day. So the first thing we're going to look at would be the averages over there for RBC Heritage. You're going to focus on that side of things before we talk about Corrales. So the scoring averages from today were just a hair harder than round 1, in which with the weather forecast was to be expected. There was some wind out there in the morning, and though it was a little bit more receptive for the first half of play, and it played a little bit easier on that side, the PM played a lot harder than what you had for Thursday. So these averages just skewing a little bit towards the more difficult side of things, which is exactly what we were calling for. But maybe the one average that didn't go that direction was the green and regulation average, which was still at about 11.4 per round. Now the weather out there for tomorrow looks about the same as today. You'll see that the wind gusts are going to be in about 20 miles an hour or lower, and your sustained winds are about 10 to 12 miles an hour for the day. So very similar to what you had for today's action, which without a cut line, right? This is a no cut event, a signature field. You're going to get the same kind of field, same kind of setup out there for moving day, just with maybe slightly easier pins because it's a moving day setup. And we didn't have the pins before, but I'll go ahead and refresh this to see if they maybe posted them since then. Yeah, no pin sheet quite yet for the RBC Heritage, but I'm assuming that it'll be a classical moving day setup in that maybe these averages get a hair easier over there for tomorrow. So birdie average might go up to like 4.1 per round. Bogey average might go ever so slightly down. And just like today, where the morning played easier than the afternoon, I would expect that same kind of trend to hold up. And it wasn't so much the wind that caused that for round number 2. If you guys saw my showdown live stream earlier, which by the way is over there on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel, I already did that earlier tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time. You'll notice that I thought it was actually the receptiveness of the golf course that led to that change and not so much the wind. So expect a similar type of dynamic for round number 3. And yeah, until we see the pins, I guess we can't confirm the easier setup, but most of the time out here for round 3, this golf course plays a whole lot easier. So the first thing we're going to focus on are a few props over here on Prize Picks, which I've already entered and already posted over there on my Patreon page. So if you're already a member over there, you may already have these 2 props, but I promise you, we'll talk a little bit more on the prop side here afterwards. Of course, guys, for every piece of exposure that I'm getting to as soon as I'm entering them, the place to be is the Patreon page. That's where you can catch all of these before any potential bumps. And with the plus EV value that we have here, you're going to want to get them in as soon as humanly possible. So to join that, there's a link in the description of the video to join. $15 a month gets you access to not only every slip that I'm entering, but also all these averages that you see over here, as well as weather reports for every single round. But let's talk about these 2. So first off, we have this Justin Rose under on bogeys. He's got a 10 a.m. tee time, so he's going off in the first half, which I think is going to be an advantage tomorrow. And also, he's at a 2.5 line, which if we compare him over there to the books, is going to be a plus EV value. So if we go over here to the Caesars side and go to the bogey board, you'll see that they have Justin Rose at this number and minus 140 for the under. If we go over here to Draftkings and take a look at his line as well, they also have the bogey board posted, and Justin Rose is minus 145 for the under. So in terms of plus EV value, right, minus 140, minus 145 is about as good as you're going to get. And today, the shots gained profile left a lot of regression with the short game. He lost a ton of strokes on the greens. In fact, 4 strokes over there in round 2. And in round 1, I mean, he showed us the opposite, right? He went out there, gained 2 strokes short game, over 1.3 strokes over there with the putter. So I wouldn't expect him to have nearly as much trouble over there on the greens. And it's kind of like round 4 at the Masters, right? He really struggled over there to get anything to drop. And then round 1 at this event, he completely flipped it into the positive. And if he can do that, I really like his chances to go under this sort of number. And even with all those struggles on the greens, he only had 3 bogeys or worse today. So only went over by 0.5 with the easier setup, a better chance over there on the greens and the putting stats. That's why I really like that number. And when you give me the plus EV value on top of that, that's when it becomes a play that you want to go out there and attack. So that's going to be the first prop that we're mixing in. The other one was an over on Michael Kim greens. And just like a Justin Rose, he's also going off real early. You've got him over there for an 8:50 a.m. tee time. And at 11 greens regulation, he's 0.4 lower than the actual field average. And what you'll see with Michael Kim, if you take a look at his recent track record, is that he's gained strokes on approach in 10 straight worldwide events. In fact, you have to go the whole way back to February for the last time they went out there and lost strokes. And that was at on January 25th over there at the Farmers Insurance Open. So, I mean, he's just been absolutely striping it. And this week, the stats maybe haven't been as good as what we're used to seeing, but they haven't been terrible for Michael Kim. Round number one, he was a slight loser over there on approach, but it was only 3/100ths of a stroke. And then today, though he didn't have a massively high green percentage, he did gain a stroke over there with his iron play. So, you know, with the field average at over that 11 mark, a lot of push equity at that number as well. You can see why I'd be taking that sort of prop. And just to give you guys the stats from 2025, this is the green regulation board for this year. You can see that he ranks number 48 on the tour. So, you know, obviously well above average in that category, the kind of guy that you take because of the push equity there and the early tee time working with him. And, you know, though the field average might be 11.4 per round, just like some of the other categories that we went through, the AM guys are going to have a better go at it. So maybe the AM average is truly closer to 11.75 per round, maybe even a whole 12 per round because of those softer greens, which would also be an advantage for taking some of these overs. So this is only a 2.75x payout. Actually, I take that back. For some reason, this pays 3x, it says over here. So I've actually got to correct that over there on my Patreon page. I didn't notice when I entered it that the payout was 3x on those two, but that's a welcome surprise, right? When you get a better payout than what you're expecting, you will always take that. And yeah, definitely some correlation that you have between these as well. So make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. Again, Patreon page is where I'm posting all these. I don't think we have an underdog board, or actually we just got it as of the last update over here. And because they waited for Prize Picks to go out there and post, I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to be copy and pasting the board. So just doing a quick little run through here, it looks like they're just adding the props as we're speaking here. So unless there's anything wildly different from site to site, there's not going to be that much to go ahead and talk about here. But the board itself, they priced it just like you had for round number two, which with the easier setup and it being moving day, that's why I thought there was some value on whether it's like, you know, overs on birdies, maybe some unders on strokes, or these two, right, were different examples of positive stance plays that I was looking at. The earlier the tee time, the better, I'd say, for any sort of prop exposure you're looking at. In terms of the matchup side, there was one I already went out there and played, and you can see it over here on the right side. So it's going to be this Gary Woodland versus Jacob Bridgman 2-ball. They're matched up against each other over there for a tee time, and I got Gary Woodland here in Draftkings at plus 100. Now, I can only play in Hard Rock Bet. They're currently adding the board as we speak here, so I'm actually going to go ahead and refresh this and see what we have in terms of the matchups. But I'd love to bet that at plus 100. Now, they've only bet some of they've only put up some of the head-to-heads over here that don't have Gary Woodland included. But once we get those two balls posted, and they only post them with the tie, so I'm going to have to get a much better number than plus 100 here. But if you can give me like plus 125 to plus 140 out there on Gary Woodland for this, I'm going to be a buyer even with that tie, because if you take a look at the matchups over here on Bet the Number, of course, guys, that's what I use for all the shots gained analysis. It's the easiest to use database that we have in the industry. But this matchup tool also makes breaking down these head-to-heads really easy. And this is just for the live stats, so just from the first two rounds here. And you can see that they're pretty close on a lot of these metrics. But the main ones I care about are approach play and the putting, because I want guys that are the better iron players. So if you take a look at that, that favors Woodland. Now, Woodland hasn't been particularly great with the irons this week. You can see just slightly losing over the first few rounds, but Jacob Bridgman is losing 2.5 strokes in the category. So, you know, I'd much rather have the guy that's closer to neutral than losing over 2 strokes there. Then the putter hasn't been terrible for Gary Woodland, but he's been pretty average in the 2 short game categories, right? He's not carrying his game in one specific category, whereas Bridgman is really struggling with his iron play and then also putting way over his head, gaining nearly 1.6 shots gained putting per round. So the fact that Woodland, who's the more consistent player, the more sustainable shots gained metrics, I would say, out of these two profiles, is the one that is plus money. That's why I'm looking for that for a bet. So hopefully it gives you guys some insight into what I'm looking for those matchup markets. But if I can find a quote unquote underdog, and I'll put that in quotes because I don't agree with that whatsoever, that is more of the ball striker between the two, the more more experienced player in a Gary Woodland as well, then I'm always going to be a buyer on that sort of option. So that's an idea of the kind of 3-ball and matchup bets that I'm looking for on any given slate out of here. And of course, a little taste over here on the prop side as well. So those were all the kind of props that I prepared over here for the stream. Let me see if there's any bets that you guys want me to deep dive down there in the chat, which by the way, if you haven't gotten a chance to go ahead and throw those down there already, make sure you go ahead and do so, because outside of just going through a few other categories on here, we have no more scheduled stuff to go through. So it's going to be all of what you guys want to talk about going forward. He said, what's going on? You just joined up. What am I feeling for unders? So I pointed out a few there, like the Rose there, the Michael Kim one. But in general, I think positive stance plays, just look for the early guys. So Scotty wouldn't really fit that, right? He's more of a later starter. If you could find a category that you think is value, where he's just projected inefficiently, then by all means, you can still attack some of those later guys. But I think if you're trying to take advantage of the course conditions, then the earlier the tee time, the better. So that's kind of what I did with those two there. Let's go through a few of these other ones. So the birdie or better matchups, they all have a 0.5 on it there. So just a little bit of a PSA for anyone betting those. A tie would be an under because of that 0.5. So maybe you weren't familiar with that before, just a little bit of a heads up there. Looking at those, I usually try and find some unders to bet, because if you're going to take an over with that 0.5, you've really got to find an edge to make it worth it. So oftentimes, and it's just a generalization, right? Going to be exceptions to the rule all the time. Some of the unders tend to be the best value. So kind of going through these on there, there are a few that were kind of standing out. Like Pendrith is a high birdie percentage player going against my guy Jordan. I'm never going to bet against Jordan, so you're not going to see me taking that under, but that would kind of be the matchup I'm looking at, where it's like an early guy like Pendrith, who, by the way, is towards the bottom end of the leaderboard. So he's one of the first few groups out, versus Jordan that has a much more respectable score. So if you're leading into the weather advantage out there, that under could make a lot of sense. In fact, it almost makes enough sense where I want to go out there and play it. But you guys know I'm a huge Jordan Spieth fan, so that is probably not going to happen. But just based on numbers, just based on the principle alone, that wouldn't be a terrible lean. But that's kind of the idea, right? You could take that same principle and extend it to the rest of this board and maybe find some values from that perspective as well. And I was looking at the birdie board before. These aren't going to be the only props that I take, so I'm going to have to keep the rest of the slips behind the paywall. Again, Patreon page in the description to go out there and see those. But some over on birdies would make sense, especially for these early guys that have to be aggressive, like a Tom Hoagie, even like your Sahith Theegalas of the world that are going off early. They've got nothing to lose. This is a no-cut event. They're playing the last 2 days. The only thing that they have to gain is if they go out there and shoot low the last few rounds, and then they can go from like 60th out there to like maybe like top 25 or something like that, because doing so would not only make them a whole lot more money this week, but also would really help them out from the FedEx Cup point department. So I think you're going to see some of these guys really go after pin locations, try and do some damage, because there's little to no downside on going after these pins, because if they shoot over par, they shoot even par, kind of spin their wheels, then so what? They're going to make the same check that they're aligned to make right now. So maybe some overs on birdies for the early guys could be in play as well. And I'm not a huge proponent of fades, but I guess if you were going to try and find some fade value, I'm sure there's a few guys here that are projected too optimistically. There always is on a slate. There's always going to be a few guys, right, that are too low with their strokes lines. I would try and fade some later guys if you're going to try and do so. But because of the moving day setup, again, we haven't had the pins to go out there and confirm that quite yet. I'm kind of hesitant to take that kind of approach. But if you were going to do so, and do it with some later starters. And speaking of, there's actually another piece of exposure that I want to go through together. And we can't bring it up here in the live stream. So it's going to be over on Sleeper, guys. Sleeper is another prop site where they post golf props. Recently, I've started posting props for golf a little bit more consistently over there. And they have some value that I actually took a fade on. So over there, they have Adam Scott at 70.5 strokes. So again, I can't bring it up because it's only on the app. But you could see over on a site like Prize Picks, Adam Scott is at 69.5 strokes. So at 70.5 on a site like Sleeper, there's obviously a one-stroke discrepancy there. So that is an under I took. And by the way, he's got a 1050 tee time, so he was going off relatively early. You take a look at the shots gained metrics, he's also playing pretty balanced golf. He's not like carrying himself in any one specific category. In fact, other than the putter, nothing really stands out at all. And then the other thing there is just the value, right? Over there with the one stroke discrepancy. So I had that side, and then the other side was the other and only fade that I've taken to this point. And not a whole bunch of props I've mixed in quite yet, so maybe that ends up changing. But it was an over on Jason Day at 68.5 strokes. They had a favorable multiplier over there on Sleeper, and he was down there 0.5 lower than Prize Picks. And on a lot of the other sports books, so like Draftkings, for example, if we go over here to the players, the round score, you'll see that Jason Day's at 69.5. Now he is minus 150 out there towards the under, but that's another one stroke discrepancy. So again, over on Day at 68.5, under on Adam Scott at 70.5. And Day's got a little bit of a later tee time, right? He's not going off at 2 like the leaders, but at 12:15, he's going to be playing all of his round in the afternoon, right? When conditions might get just a hair more difficult than what they are in the morning. And let's say the scoring average goes from like -2 to like -1. It's kind of what I'm expecting over there between the two different sides. They would have to gain 2 strokes to the field to go out there and shoot a 68, which in an elite tier field like this is something that I'll go out there and fade. So you have the value on that side, right? 0.5 to a stroke in that direction, and then the whole stroke discrepancy over there with the Adam Scott prop. And those two on Sleeper pay 3.18x. So they adjust the multipliers based on the action coming in. So, if you're watching this live, you can probably still get it at that number. But if you're getting it after the fact, it might be a slightly lower payout. But anything over, let's say, like a 3.1x payout, I would probably take for those two. You're getting a little bit of an anti-correlation boost over there. They do the same kind of things like you get on sites like Prize Picks and Underdog, but their anti-correlation boost and their correlation boost, they have some of that going as well, is less severe than what you have on these other sites. So that's another reason I really like Sleeper, on top of the fact that their projections are usually off compared to some of these other sports books. So, if you're a believer in plus EV value, another thing worth noting with the Jason Day feed as well is that he's been really putter heavy this week. You can see even more so than Adam Scott, right? He's close to that 3 shots gained with the putter. And unfortunately for him, right, he's lost over 1.6 strokes on approach. So this is the kind of stat profile that reeks kind of regressing in a negative way. Whereas Adam Scott, it doesn't scream anything, right? It's just kind of like neutral across the board. We're taking an under the whole way up there at 70.5. That's why Jason Day with the later tee time is somebody that I'm taking for the other side of that. So hopefully it gives you guys an idea of or a little bit of a taste on how I'm attacking this sort of slate. But for all the other pieces of exposure that I'm taking, so that's whether it's Underdog Prize Picks or over there in Sleeper, Patreon's where you can find that. And then, when we get the board over there in Hard Rock, I'm hoping that we can get that Gary Woodland at plus money, because if it's that same sort of odds over there for that, I'm going to be a 1.5, maybe even a 2-unit buyer over there on that sort of matchup. So let me see if there's any last second questions to go through. If not, I'm going to hop on out of here because it's getting pretty late. And it looks like we're good to go out there from that perspective. Best of luck out there with everything you guys are going with. Again, the only thing I ask for is that you guys smash the like button before you hop on out of here, and also that you subscribe so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. That will, of course, include our Round 4 live stream, as well as all the content throughout the rest of the year, including for the Zurich Championship, Zurich Classic. I forget exactly the terminology for it, but the team event over there in New Orleans. I'm looking forward to that, a little bit of a change of pace when it comes to the schedule, but best of luck out there with everything, and I'll see you guys out there tomorrow night.